All right, so today I've got a bit of a rant. So my wife was out with a group of women recently, and this group of women was a diverse group. It was not a fitness-focused or bodybuilding group. My wife really was the only fitness-focused person there. And one of the women there started going off talking about how people who track their food, track their calories, have something mentally wrong with them. They have an unhealthy relationship with food. And then one of the other women chimed in and said, people who track calories are weird. And they essentially all started going off talking about how, this can create eating disorders. People who track calories are weird. I knowing how women can be, I know they were directing at my wife. My wife has literally tried to help a few of them set up their own nutrition plans and help them. But the whole point is, there's a huge movement right now all over against, tracking food. A lot of people are saying that if you track your food, you're using an app to calculate what you eat, you're restricting what you eat, that this is going to create a unhealthy relationship with food, or you're going to cause an eating disorder, and all of that. And the reality is, guys, the group of women my wife was the only one in shape. Most of the women there were not in shape. A few, were quite overweight. And then a few women there, their husbands that I know personally are very, very overweight themselves. So they're saying that you should essentially intuitively eat, not track food, but they themselves weren't healthy. And so the whole point here is intuitive eating, what humans have done for thousands of years. It did work to an extent. Some people have always overeaten, but it worked to an extent. But where we're at with modern history right now and with our modern food supply, companies have intentionally created processed foods and created foods to be as palatable and as addictive as possible, meaning you are going to want to keep eating and eating and eating. Plus, a lot of this processed food is incredibly calorie dense. So something that would have filled you up if you're eating like a single ingredient food, like say rice or grass-fed beef, you can go ahead and way overeat, say a bag of processed chips, and it take a lot more calories to get full. The problem with intuitive eating is our modern food supply. Most people can't intuitively eat and not go completely wrong and go overweight. Another big factor of this, is discipline. To be frank, I have so many people come to me and they will be extremely disciplined and very motivated with their working out. For years, they will have, tracked, their workouts. They will have, been in the gym 5, 6, sometimes 7 days a week, which, that's a problem in itself. But they will be very, very consistent in hitting their workouts really hard. And leaving so much on the table, because then I'll ask, what have you been eating? Where are your calories at? Where are your macros at? And they have no earthly idea. And then I'll go through and I'll get an example of what they eat in a week. And most people are way overeating calories and under eating protein. And they're just leaving so much potential on the table. And this is across the board from bodybuilders I see to runners. So many people are doing this. So many people, even to this day, have no earthly idea how much they're eating. And that's the whole point, guys. You don't need to be overly religious with this. If you are trying to become a pro bodybuilder, then yes, you're going to need to track down your food down to a T. But for the vast majority of people, I don't even recommend this. But I recommend, occasionally tracking your food to have a pretty good general idea of how much you're eating, and that may break that down to the macros. How much protein are you eating? How much carbs are you eating? How much fat? And then from there, you're able to make adjustments, and then you don't need to track every single day, but it keeps you somewhat in check. This way you can still kind of swap things in and out. You can eat foods you like, but it will still keep you within limits. The thing I don't really understand is how people are able to be disciplined with hobbies, disciplined within their job, disciplined even within working out. But when it comes to showing any bit of discipline with eating, it's like, nope, if I do that, I'm going to have an eating disorder, and, people who track calories are just weird. It's really kind of mind-blowing to me, and I can't really wrap my head around it. This is kind of the opposite, in my opinion, of an eating disorder. Yes, you can take this too hard to where you have an unhealthy relationship with food and you think, I've dealt with many clients that they'll have a dessert or a cheat meal, or sometimes overdo it, and then they feel extreme guilt, and then they kind of reverse things out the next few days. That's not good. But if you do this right, this can be part of your lifestyle, that you have complete freedom with food, but you still keep yourself in parameters to where you're not way overeating food. You're eating enough to support whatever your training goals are, and keep you healthy. The reality is, guys, we in the modern world, we have so much crap in our food now, that if you're not paying attention to this, you're not only hurting your training goals, but your hormone health and your internal health is probably not going to be great as well. You need to at least have an idea of what you're eating. And if you're one of these people that, is, an ectomorph and you can't put on weight to save your life, you can intuitively eat a little bit more. You're not going to have trouble putting on fat like a lot of people do. The majority of people are going to need to at least have an idea of what they're eating. But with that, you still need to be paying attention to your hormone health, your metabolic health, all of that, because I've had many people come to me that they can be, very, very lean. It's just very hard for them to put on any bit of weight, whether that's fat or muscle, but their internal health, their blood work does not look good. So you need to have, a good idea of what you're eating, and then the junk, if you don't want to cut that out, you need to have that in moderation. But the point is, guys, it is not weird to track macros, or track calories even. That's something that is frankly a necessity in today's day and age. And if you are having any bit of training goals, which I know a lot of you watching this, and you're not tracking your calories, you are leaving so much on the table. Once you hurt your insulin sensitivity, once you gain a little bit too much body fat, you're hurting your muscle gain potential. If you're under eating protein, once again, you're hurting your muscle gain, strength gain potential, your recovery. And then, guys, too, this should really be kind of across the board. You should be methodical with how you do things. If you're going to put effort into something, and you want to progress, and this is with really, frankly, anything in life, you should adopt a mentality of wanting to track. You want to track things. That way, one, you keep yourself in parameters, like with tracking your calories, but then two, you track so you can see progression. So that's where, too, this is a talk for another time, but the amount of people I see still in the gym never track a lift, and they go in and they're just hitting 3 sets of 10, 4 sets of 10, or just doing arbitrary numbers, kind of guessing where they were the week before. They are leaving so much on the table. This is where I've talked about this for literally years now. The way I was able to go from 157 pound ultra runner to getting my IFBB Pro card with literally a year and a half, the biggest piece of advice I can give people is track your lifts. If you track your lifts, then week after week after week, every session you go in, you know the numbers you're trying to beat from the week before. If you have that continual progression, that continual progression is leading to more muscle mass, some more size, but then two, it's also increasing your metabolism. So now you're burning more fat, now you need more food. And now the more food also feeds more progression, and it's this revolving wheel. I'll talk about that in another video sometime, but if you're not tracking your food and you're not tracking your workouts, you're just leaving so much on the table, and it takes so little time to do it. And guys, like I said, you don't have to be overly religious about it. You don't have to keep yourself boxed into only this amount of calories, this amount of macros per day, depending on the goal. But if you're just someone who wants to be healthy, then you need to at least have an idea of how much and what you're eating. And then, kind of set somewhat relaxed boundaries for yourself, but keep yourself within those boundaries. But guys, like I said, this is just kind of a rant. It kind of blew me away that people are still saying that people who track calories are weird, especially when those people tend to have not only better body composition, but also better health markers too. And it's not something that causes, a mental eating disorder or an unhealthy relationship with food. I've seen with some women especially can, a little bit more, easier than what I've seen with men, develop a somewhat of an unhealthy relationship with food because they don't want to put on a lick of fat. but that's not inherently from tracking calories. That comes from other things, which we can talk about in other videos. But I hope this was of some value to you. Something I've seen a lot lately is the intuitive eating versus tracking calories. Intuitive eating is great if you can actually intuitively eat and really, really know what you're eating, and all that. But in today's day and age, with what's in our food, how good the food tastes, the additives they're putting in it to make it more addictive, it's way easier said than done. If you're doing something like carnivore, something like vegan, where it's a very kind of black or white diet, then that's where the popularity of some of these diets are coming with, because it is a little bit easier to intuitively eat with those and not go crazy with it if you're not doing processed. But you're really just kind of eliminating macronutrients here, and that's not really needed if you just track calories, which takes less than 3 minutes a day. But I hope you guys found some value in this. If you did, please go ahead and smash that like button, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Leave any comments or questions down below. All glory to God. God bless y'all, and have a great rest of your day.